This is Rock and Roll English. Real people, real English.
Hello everyone and welcome to another show of Rock and Roll English. As my American friend says in the introduction, it is real people speaking real English. So, on the show today we have Dan. You want to say hello,
Hi.
Dan?
How you doing? I'm a repeat guest.
Repeat guest. I've got a question for you though, Dan.
Okay.
Are you a real person?
I can confirm I am a real person.
And do you speak real English?
I speak the Queen's English.
Well, welcome on the show then, Dan.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. So today we're talking about napping. Are you excited about this, Dan?
Yeah, sure.
So just for our listeners though, explain what a nap is.
A nap is when you go to sleep for a very short period of time in the afternoon, like a siesta.
Like a siesta, the international word. Well, it could be in the morning or the evening. Why the afternoon?
Well, why would it be in the morning? Because you get up in the morning, you don't think, I'm going to have another nap.
Well,
The afternoon, it splits up the day, doesn't it?
so it splits up the day. That's a good bit of rock and roll vocabulary there. So it breaks the day. But I don't live by the rules, Dan. I'll nap when I want to nap, okay?
Do you nap in the morning?
No, but I don't nap in the afternoon.
Okay, so you nap in the afternoon, yeah?
I don't nap.
Okay.
And
So
this brings me on.
a real rule breaker.
This brings me on to my next question. Actually, do you nap?
No, I don't have time to nap.
Okay, so what do you do?
I work.
Yeah, the weekends.
Oh, well, it depends. If I've had a drink, then sometimes I fall asleep. But I wouldn't go as far to say it was a planned nap.
So that's actually another interesting thing that we'll be talking about in a minute, the different categories of naps. So we're looking at an article from the National Sleep Foundation.
Yes.
Although I found out it's the American National Sleep Foundation. So
Yeah.
already...
Take it with a pinch of salt.
So that's a fantastic bit of vocabulary there, Dan. Take it with a pinch of salt. It means that we will not take it so seriously, which is sort of what I recommend you do with what Dan says. Take everything he says with a pinch of salt because, he's not a serious person.
Correct.
So anyway, yeah, so it's the National Sleep Foundation, the American one, but we'll have a look at the benefits and the negatives in a minute. But first of all, let's look at the categories. So they say there are three types of naps. There's a planned nap, an emergency nap, and a habitual nap. So a habitual comes from the word habit. Habitual nap. So what type of napper are you, Dan? So when I say napper there, I'm making the word nap into a noun.
Well, define emergency nap.
To be honest, typical Americans, I don't like their categories so much. It says here, I'll read it for you. It occurs, which means it happens, when you are suddenly very tired and cannot continue with the activity that you were originally doing.
Well, in that case, that is the only napping I tend to do. I don't plan to nap, and I don't nap out of habit.
See, I personally think that it should be called an accidental nap because an emergency nap, it's not like I think, oh my God, I need to nap. This is an emergency.
But this is what happens when you are dealing with Americans.
Come on, Dan. We're citizens of the world. Yes, stop being racist.
Oh, we are. They're not.
Dan, you will be arrested after this show. Okay.
What, by the FBI?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we've agreed that you're accidental napper.
What about you?
Yeah, probably the same. An accidental napper. I never plan for these things, but
it's interesting actually because I've got a French friend here, and
so he's not racist. He has a French friend.
Yeah,
he's just saying this to prove that he's not racist.
Exactly. He's definitely not American, but he's definitely French. And he, without fail, has to have a nap after lunch on the weekend. And it's quite irritating if I'm with him and we're having a drink and that's it. He has to have a nap.
So when he says, though, without fail, it means that he always has to. He has no choice. But just explain this, though, Dan. So you're with him in the afternoon. You're out, I imagine, in a pub or somewhere.
Or if I'm with him, or if we have lunch, he'll then say, I have to go home to have a nap. I think it's his way of not wanting to spend time with me.
I agree. I actually agree with that. May be a good tactic, maybe something that I will do.
But just to clarify, I don't go home and nap with him.
I recently found out that Dan snores, snores is the noise that you make when you sleep. In fact, I will do an impression just so we can understand what snoring is.
I don't snore that loud, though.
Yes, you do. Not that we were sharing a bed. I just would like to say that we were in the same room. Dan was in one bed. I was in the other bed.
That's not entirely true, is it, Martin?
Well, actually, we did spend one night in the same bed on different sides of the bed. There was no touching.
Yes, correct.
No touching. Okay, so what do you associate napping with? It's an interesting question.
What do I associate napping with?
Like what characteristic in a person?
Well, Europeans. That's not a characteristic, I know, but
you're not going down the racist thing, are you?
I've got a lot of European friends. Okay.
Okay.
What about you?
Well, probably, which is the incorrect answer, I would associate it with being lazy. So being lazy is when you do not want to do anything and you don't have the energy. For example, when I often, if someone says to me I need to go home for a nap, I see them as a weak person, not a strong person.
Yeah, I don't see the point. I just think sleep at night.
That is one thing I agree with you on there, Dan. But they actually say that this in the article,
the Americans,
also true, that this is the wrong attitude because there are benefits, and says that people like Winston Churchill, Napoleon, Einstein, Thomas Edison all napped. But then
these people have time to nap. I'm not being funny. I'm sure Winston Churchill had time to nap. I don't have time to nap. I'm busier than Churchill.
Well, the thing that I found interesting about the list, so it has Churchill, Napoleon, Einstein, Thomas Edison, and George Bush. So
really,
the last person was not such an inspirational character.
I have an interesting fact for you, Martin.
Okay, I love an interesting fact.
Thomas Edison used to go to sleep in the afternoon holding ball bearings in his hand.
So he means basically a ball. When he said he used to, it's something he did obviously in the past when he was alive, because now he's not. Okay.
Exactly. And he would go to sleep in his rocking chair thinking of a problem, and then in the afternoon, and then when the balls would drop out of his hand, he would wake up and he would write down whatever was in his mind as he woke up, and often it was the solution to the problem.
You, number one, have told me that story about 10 times.
But your listeners haven't heard it, so...
And number two, I also read that that's not true, that that's a myth. So a myth is something that people say because it sounds good, but it's not actually true.
Well, where did you hear it was a myth?
In a book.
What book?
How to Fly a Horse, a book I know that you have read too.
That's not. I've read that book, and that is not in there.
We will talk about this after. Thank you, Dan. So the benefits of napping. Sorry. So it says that it makes you more alert and increases performance. And there is a study at NASA, the people that go into space.
They should know.
Okay, exactly. Said that after a 40-minute nap, their performance increased by 34%, and their alertness, so feeling more alert and like paying more attention, by 100%. What do you think of that?
Well,
I don't know how you measure alertness or
I,
attention.
I'm certainly not going to argue with NASA's science, so I'll just assume they're correct.
Okay.
What do you think? Do you think it's...
Well, it's interesting. Maybe I will do a 40-minute nap, but I don't know how
I
or
thought
when.
you said people who nap are lazy.
Well, I've got an open mind, Dan. Okay, I can change my opinion.
You've got time to nap. Some of us haven't.
Wow, you're such a great man.
I know.
Soon you will be on the list with Churchill and all of the rest of the people that nap. Einstein.
Correct. Some of the greatest men in history.
Sure, exactly. So it also says that napping improves your learning and working memory, and has psychological benefits. So considering you are weak mentally, this could be good for you, Dan.
Well, hopefully, yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not going to nap, so I will never see. But I will definitely be keeping a keen eye on whether you become more intelligent when you start napping.
So a keen eye. So it means like it's a very good term. So he says, "I will be interested to find out." Is another way to explain that. So we've looked at a few benefits. Now let's look at a few negatives because I'm a fair person. So one of the ones it says is that if you sleep for too long, which it says over 30 minutes, it can make you feel groggy. So groggy is when you wake up and you feel like, it's about the only way I can explain that.
It sounds like something else, but carry on.
So do you ever feel groggy when you wake up after a nap?
What? 100%.
Yeah.
But it's not. Sometimes when I'm at work, I will fall asleep for. It can be 5-10 minutes at the end of my lunch.
At work?
No, on my lunch break at work.
Somewhere. But where
Like a lunch
exactly?
break at work.
Yeah, and where do you go to have your lunch break?
In my car sometimes. Or
Now everyone, this is a rock and roll star. He has a lunch break and sits in his car on his own.
Or just in the park, and I fall asleep for the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I wake up absolutely shattered. So
shattered. Oh, good word there, Dan. Shattered means very, very, very tired. Well, it's strange only for 5 minutes because it says this happens after 30 minutes. And this is on another article that I read. This is an English one, so we could probably trust it more. It says if you sleep for more than 30 minutes, this is Dr. Tomahide Yamada. I'm not sure that's the correct pronunciation, but it says that you can actually get diabetes if you sleep for more than 30 minutes.
I saw that. How? I don't understand.
Yeah, the science part I'm not going to tell you. What I find interesting though is the NASA people said they slept for 40 minutes, so
they've all got diabetes.
Exactly. Everyone in NASA will have diabetes, which is
well. At least they'll get to the moon. So
exactly, they will get to the moon finally.
Yeah.
They also had some advice for napping on this. This is going back to the American one now, which I found.
This is the most ludicrous advice I've ever seen.
Ludicrous there. Ludicrous means completely stupid. So, what is the advice? Read it for us, Dan.
Well, the advice in order to nap and I guess sleep in general is to make sure the room is dark and there is no noise. That's obvious. That you don't need to conduct scientific research to come to that conclusion.
Well, that I personally think is some fantastic advice.
Of course, but it's common sense.
Exactly. But yeah, so for everyone, napping is good for you, makes you more alert, but will also give you diabetes. And
pros and cons.
And listen to Dan's advice if you want to have a nap. Make sure the room is dark. And
that's not my advice. Okay, I'm just reading the science.
Okay, well you said that. So
will you be napping in future?
I'll think about it. And and the other piece of advice for me is don't snore like Dan. Don't snore. Remember, that's snoring, and that's what Dan does.
Yeah, but I sleep talk as well, so I don't think I've got much choice.
Also does that, which is very, very frustrating. Okay, well, thanks as always for your time, Dan.
That's all right. Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure. Okay, so that was me talking to my friend Desperate Dan there about napping. I call him Desperate Dan, not when he's listening, because he's a lot bigger than me, but he's not listening now, so it's fine. So let's look at the vocabulary that we used today. Obviously, the key word was the word nap, which means when you have a small sleep at some point during the day. The most rock and roll piece of vocabulary was when Dan said to take it with a pinch of salt. So to take it with a pinch of salt, which means not to take something seriously. I think Dan said about when we were looking at the study and it was done by Americans. So Dan said to take it with a pinch of salt. He also said without fail, which is a good piece of vocabulary. So it basically means always. When he said that his French friend, without fail, always has a nap. So it's just to enforce always. Another word was snore, which is the noise you make when you sleep, which is what Dan does, which I discovered recently. Although at this point, I would just like to clarify the story of Dan and I sharing a bed. We went to Catania and we did Airbnb, and there was only one bed, unfortunately. So I had to share, but I did not sleep much because he was snoring. A myth is a good word, and that's something that seems, well, people say is true, that actually isn't, which was the story Dan used about Thomas Edison with the balls in his hands. It's a myth. It's not true. The word groggy also came out. And remember, groggy is the feeling you have when you wake up and you feel very... There is no better way to explain that. So just remember, groggy, and there are no problems. Another word was shattered, which is basically another word to say extremely tired, which Dan said he feels when he wakes up after a nap in his car during his lunch break, which is a little bit strange. And the last word was ludicrous. Ludicrous is something totally stupid, and which Dan used for the advice about when they said to keep the room dark and with no noise, which, if I'm honest, I agree with. That is ludicrous. Anyway, thanks for listening and have a great day, and I will see you soon.